What's going on, everybody? You're watching New York Giants Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Marshall Green. Today's show, wide receiver targets that the Giants could look at on the trade block as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline, which is November 1st. November 1st. We are just a couple weeks away from the trade deadline. There were rumors that the Giants were interested in DJ Moore and Terrace Marshall. Not sure how true they were. We talked about it on today's show. I'd love to get DJ Moore. Well, let's look at some other guys. But first, let's look at this Giants wide receiver depth chart and maybe why the Giants should trade for a wide receiver. Because Kenny Golladay, he's hurt. Sterling Shepard, out for the year. Kadarius Toney, he's got 2 bad hamstrings. And Wan'Dale Robinson, who I do think will play this week, I'm not expecting him to be a big difference maker early on as he continues to battle back from what it sounds like a very significant knee injury. So let's get it started. Let's look at some wide receiver trade targets. And the first one is from the team in the same city, right across the street. Denzel Mims of the New York Jets. Mims has been a healthy scratch all year for the New York Jets. The former draft pick out of Baylor, the long and lanky wide receiver that can push the ball down the field. He can stretch the field. He just hasn't really found his way with the New York Jets. In 20 career games, he just has 31 receptions, 490 yards, hasn't scored a touchdown in the regular season. He tore up the Giants in the preseason. I like Denzel Mims a lot, and I know some people might say right now, the Jets and the Giants, they would never do a trade. Yeah, go back. Look at the Leonard Williams trade. He actually played for the Jets before the New York Giants. What about Chase Claypool, the wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers? I like Chase Claypool, big wide receiver, but right now he's in somewhat of a crowded wide receiver depth chart with the Steelers. You got Deontay Johnson. George Pickens was just elevated to their wide receiver 1. You know they like him. You got Boykin. Austin's going to be getting off injury reserve soon. It just hasn't seemed like Claypool this year has fit in this Steelers offense, and it might be time for them to move on from him after his first great year in the NFL. The Steelers, although the reason is the Steelers could be trade deadline sellers. Pitt already paid Johnson and has Pickett. They paid Deontay Johnson a lot of money. They used a high premium draft pick on George Pickens. Could they look to recoup some of their assets in a trade if they moved on from Chase Claypool as we get closer and closer to the NFL trade deadline? So I want to ask all the Giants fans watching right now, would you trade a 3rd-round pick for Chase Claypool? Would you send a 3rd-round pick to Pittsburgh for Chase Claypool? Type Y for yes, or you can go down and type N for no. What about Curtis Samuel of the Washington Commanders? I almost said football team. I like Curtis Samuel a lot. Probably not an ideal trade partner, being that the Giants are NFC East rivals with Washington. But I think Samuel is a great football player, and I think he fits perfectly in a Brian Dable and Mike Kafka offense. He could fit that Mecole Hardman role. He could fit the role of a lot of people like they were in Buffalo. I think he would fit this offense. I think he's a guy that the Giants could look to scheme open, get him the ball in handoff situations, get him the ball in short passing situations. You can get really creative with Curtis Samuel on the offensive end. Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, they would get extremely creative and extremely innovative in ways that they could use Curtis Samuel. Kind of like they could use Kadarius Toney. But as we know, Kadarius Toney, he just hasn't. Exactly. If the Giants make a move, we'll break it down here. YouTube.com/NYGiantsTV. If the Giants make a trade, we are going live on this channel, and it's going to be a party. So if you love the Giants and you're looking for a way to stay up to date on the latest news and rumors surrounding Big Blue, lock us in. Go down right now. Hit that big red button. What about Robbie Anderson, a receiver on a team that just fired their head coach? And it looks like they're cleaning house. It looks like they're going to become sellers at the NFL trade deadline. And that's what Jay Glazer reported earlier this week of Fox Sports. He says teams will now be calling the Panthers, trying to trade for some of their players, as they hope Carolina will look to stockpile picks as they look to rebuild. They don't have a lot of picks going into the 2023 NFL draft. I like Robbie Anderson because he can stretch the field I don't know how good of a locker room guy he is, but he is someone that's a weapon on the outside. Defensive coordinators, they got a plan to stop Robbie Anderson because in one play, he can go 80 yards to the house. The Panthers might go on a fire sale, guys. They are not a good football team. They just fired their head coach. They don't have a lot of draft picks in the 2023 season. Robbie Anderson could be a guy that's on the trade block and inevitably gets moved before the NFL trade deadline gets here on November 1st. What about a wide receiver that's kind of lost in the shuffle in Denver? What about KJ Hamler? He's explosive, he's shifty, he's quick, very similar to a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson. And following the game this past Thursday night where Russell Wilson just missed a wide open KJ Hamler for the win, KJ Hamler was pissed. Took off his helmet, threw his helmet, hands in his face like his dog ran away. He was pissed off, and for good reason. I like KJ Hamler as a player. If he is on the trade block, I would be interested in him. I'm a little weary about the past injuries he's had. He had a really, really bad knee injury this past year. But look, the Giants are so thin at wide receiver. If you could add any talent to that room, it would be a smart decision. I think Hamler would fit really, really well in this offense led by Dable and Kafka. Alert, alert, alert. Here at Yankees Chat Sports, we just started a brand new channel because playoff baseball is here. We just started a New York Yankees channel, and we did a watch party for Game 1 of the ALDS. It was a lot of fun. Some guy with the Widow's Peak, really very similar to mine. He was hosting it. He's a pretty cool guy. You should go subscribe. Chatsports.com/Yankees. Subscribe to our brand new Yankees channel. We are 34 subs away from 300 subs. If you bleed pinstripes, you love the Yanks, and you're trying to get number 28, go down right now, chatsports.com/Yankees. What about some longer shots, wide receiver targets? These ones probably aren't as likely, but there are rumors and there is some reason to believe that these guys could be on the trade market. What about Tyler Lockett? Because Lockett last year and as early as this past offseason was linked to trade rumors. This is a guy with a new regime in Seattle, new quarterback, kind of just a shifting of the dynamic. I know Carroll's still there. I know Schneider's still there. But could they look to kind of sell a little bit as the Geno allure and the Geno magic kind of wears off a little bit? You already paid a bunch of money to DK Metcalf. You did pay a lot of money to Tyler Lockett, but he hasn't been as effective this year. I like Tyler Lockett a lot. Definitely a guy that I would keep in mind if I was the Giants. We talked about DJ Moore yesterday on the show. I would love TJ Moore. He would be the perfect wide receiver for the New York Giants. Not a guy that scores a lot of touchdowns, but his yards after catch, the amount of catches that he has each season, just the dynamic playmaker that he is. He's a game breaker. Kind of gives me Odell Beckham Jr. vibes when the ball is in his hands. I mean, look at that. 400 yards after catch, 400. This is a guy that once he gets the ball in his hands, he's a dynamic threat. As Joe Shane would say, he is a generator with the football. If Moore is attainable without trading a first-round pick, I'm in. I would make the trade. I would trade a second. I would trade a second and a fourth. I would trade a second and a third the following year. I would trade up a good amount of draft capital to go get DJ Moore. Because some people may be saying, I would never trade that many picks. What about if I said, would you trade Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson for DJ Moore? Every single person in this room would say yes. That was our last first-round pick, and that was our last second-round pick. You would absolutely do anything you can to get DJ Moore. The draft is a crapshoot. You got about a 40% hit rate. DJ Moore, you got a 100% hit rate. He's already a proven great receiver. Daniel Jones, he needs one of those guys. I want to ask you guys this question, though. Is there any wide receiver you deal a first-round pick for? Is there any wide receiver that's on the trade market that you would trade a first-round pick for? Type Y for yes. Type 1 for yes, or you can go down and type 2 for no. I want to hear from you in the comment section right now. What about Tyler Boyd, a guy that's fallen down in the wide receiver rotation? I know that they have a bunch of wide receivers over there in Cincinnati with Jamar Chase and all the crew and talented cats they have over there. It'd be so awesome to have a wide receiver core like that. It's a real long shot, no doubt about it, but he is Cincinnati's wide receiver 3. Do they see down the line that they're a team that would pay Tyler Boyd a lot of money as a wide receiver 3? Because because he'd probably be wide receiver 1 with the New York Giants. He's a good football player, guys. In 2021, 67 receptions, 828 yards, 5 touchdowns. This is a guy that just is a productive football player. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 2018 and 2019. It's just a good football player. If he's on the trade block, if Cincinnati's looking to move on from him because he's fallen down on their depth chart, this is a guy that I would definitely go and look at. What about Marvin Jones of the Jacksonville Jaguars? A little bit older of a player, but still a solid player, no doubt about it. I like Marvin Jones. I think you can get him on a little bit of a cheaper trade. I don't think it would take a premium pick. Maybe a 6th round, maybe a 7th round. If you could find a way to get Marvin Jones on this football team, a veteran that is a good football player and dependable and available, be a good trade if you're the New York Giants. A guy that I would love to see on the New York Giants. What about Brandin Cooks? Brandin Cooks, who has kind of been forgotten about as one of the best wide receivers really of this last decade. I mean, look, he has 6 seasons of 1,000 yards. Cooks has 6 career 1,000-yard seasons in the National Football League. The Texans suck. Could they look to trade a guy like Brandin Cooks and get a draft pick back and build for the future and fill that need in the 2023 draft? I like Brandin Cooks. Makes a good bit of money. You could always figure that out. Joe Shane, he's a wizard. I know we could figure it out. Brandin Cooks is a good football player. The injury history concerns me a little bit. But look, he's got 6,000-yard 1,000 receiving yard seasons. That's a tongue twister, man. Give me a break. I'll ask you this question, though. Name a wide receiver the Giants should trade for. Name a wide receiver the Giants should trade for. Let me know in the comment section right now. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Go down right now, hit that big red button. If you want to beat the Baltimore Ravens, sub for Giants dubs. You want to go 5-1, hit that big red button. Subscribe, lock us in. New York Giants Now by Chat Sports.